everybody, welcome to WhatCulture Gaming. I'm Scott, joined by Josh.
Hello, Scott.
Josh, my friend, and every friend out there, I just wanted to talk about video games. To be honest, there's a whole load of them just got shown off across this week, and I feel like we're about as restored as we've ever been as a gaming populace in quite some time. It's quite a flat time across this year, but coming out of the combined power of TGS and Sony and Nintendo, there's a lot of positivity doing the rounds.
It's pretty good, isn't it? You know what I mean? I remember like a few months ago where we were a little bit worried about what was going to come out at the end of this year and into next year, and now it's just an absolute stacked deck of great video games, or hopefully great video games that we're looking forward to. I know this guy has been thinking about Tekken 8 all week. In fact, I don't think he thought about anything else, Scott.
No, I did Google before exactly how long it had been since the Tekken reveal. It's something like 60 hours or something by the time you watch this. Tekken 8 absolutely blew me away. Now, the point of this video is just to roundle up a lot of the biggest announcements of the week so far and just talk about them, how awesome they are to be put together, but also to touch on certain things like the idea of the industry overall starting to ditch the last generation, starting to make stuff that is purposefully built for PS5, Series X/S, and newer consoles and newer hardware overall, because I think a lot of us have been waiting for when is that tipping point going to come? When are we going to see stuff that feels next gen and feels like it couldn't be done on the previous set of hardware? And I think that's an exciting time. I think we've been waiting for that a long time, and I get the reality of the pandemic the last couple of years, but just the amount of stuff that was in the likes of the State of Play, like I said, it was very restorative. I think seeing new IP as well, like Rise of the Ronin, seeing veteran devs like Ryu Gagatoku and reinvest in the Yakuza Like a Dragon series, and bring things across to the West that we've wanted for like 15 years. Stuff like that was all very, very good to see. And it's that we were messaging each other when the State of Play was on, just going, gaming is back, gaming is back. Tekken 8 was absolutely unbelievable. Where would you want to start? Do you want to start with a bit of the old God of War?
Yeah, I think we should, because it's quite funny that the State of Play literally came out of nowhere, right? It was announced the night before, and judging on the previous State of Plays, or at least, the general vibe of State of Play since Sony started kicking it off. Yeah, I wasn't expecting anything.
No.
So then when we got Tekken 8 immediately, and then when it was, closed with that great look of God of War, I was giddy, because God of War, man, like, I didn't even necessarily need to see this trailer. I was already sold on the game itself, but what a trailer. Like, that's how you do video game hype, and I just think if you were somehow not invested in this franchise before, watch this trailer and then tell me you're not looking forward to it. Tell that to my face with a straight face.
That was kind of my thing with Ragnarok, is I feel like it needed a worthwhile update. I think there was the whole snowballing conversation around, has it actually been delayed? Is it actually going to be coming out in November? I think it is now.
November 9th, I think.
Yes, November 9th. Is it actually going to make that release day? And Cory Barlog was over on Twitter, returned to Twitter to tell people, yes, it is going to be making that release day. But there was the semblance of confidence that was missing from God of War until this trailer, whereas, like you said, the trailer itself was just immaculately put together. So many enticing story details, things that seem like, the idea of at the end of God of War 2018, that maybe they're doing something that inverts the idea that Kratos has to die or whatever. Not necessarily spoilers, depends how you take the end of that game. But still, I like the idea of them just getting back on that stuff, getting back on the horse, the 8-legged horse, and just showing off what that game's going to be. And we know that it's coming this year. And also, speaking of this year, Nintendo dropped Bayonetta 3's release date and made sure that we know that that's coming this year as well. Which, for me, I think the Switch has had a hell of a year this year. If you're into that stuff, if you're into the Kirby's, the Pokemons, the Splatoon 3.
This is what I'm going to say. Tell the people what you were telling me earlier this week about Nintendo's year, Scott, because you said they have outclassed both Microsoft and PlayStation when it comes to the quality of the games they've dropped over
I
the
didn't
past
use
12
the word
months.
outclassed, but I think if you're looking at when would I use outclassed?
Well, I'm paraphrasing the great man.
I use the general term that if we're comparing first-party lineups, I think Nintendo have ran away with it this year. I think if you compare, like I said, Kirby Forgotten Land, Pokemon Arceus, you've got Splatoon 3, Splatoon 3 is immaculate, by the way, and they still have Bayonetta 3 to come, going up against Horizon and
Gran Turismo, and The Last of Us Part 2, and God of War Ragnarok to come. Last of Us Part 1. It was a great game. It was a great game.
It was a great game 10 years ago, and it's a good time. And then you look at Xbox, which sadly haven't had that much this year. So my whole thing with Nintendo was that they've been putting together a hell of a lineup this year, which is only going to continue for the next few months with Bayonetta 3. But speaking of Nintendo, you on about the way that the situations rolled out, the way the conferences rolled out, and the reputations around Nintendo Directs and State of Plays.
Yeah.
Nintendo's wasn't that strong. I feel like, obviously the meme at this point is the amount of farming games. There was an absolute ton of them. Various day life dropping out of nowhere. And I love me some farming games, but there's only so much hype I can have for Harvestella. Yes. I was kind of waiting for bigger things, which is to say that they did get around to Breath of the Wild 2, which is now called Tears of the Kingdom.
Yes.
What do you think of that? Because we've not talked about that this much.
We haven't, surprisingly. It was very exciting to get a firm release date, coming next May. And I thought like the trailer itself looked obviously visually really impressive, of course, because it's it's a Zelda game. The art style is always really impressive. However, I still need to see more, of course. It was from this game. It's
painfully
very little that we actually saw in the trailer.
Like 15 seconds of it or something. And I was like, it's cool that you guys have a new mechanic that you're showing off, the idea of rewinding stuff on the ground to fly back up to the kingdom in the sky and see where things came from. But yes, I would have wanted more than a literal 15-20 seconds.
Yeah, it feels like we've been strung along on a tiny amount, morsels of footage for like 2, maybe even 3 years now. I can't remember when it was first announced. But to get outside of that though, to get a firm title, get a firm release date, that was enough to give me a satisfying update. Could we have gotten more? Probably, but that has satiated me for now.
Now, I said this on the Untitled Banter Pod with Jules. Go subscribe to the WhatCulture Gaming Podcast. I have a whole theory around what's happening with Breath of the Wild 2 / Tears of the Kingdom. I think that is a next Switch game, and they can't show too much of it because then we realize that it's on the next Switch. You've already got a bit of a hint of this on the fact that it's loading so many massive open landscapes that the Switch notoriously struggles with.
Yes.
I just feel like they're holding back to do the next Nintendo Switch, and Tears of the Kingdom will be a launch game. It's not that there won't be a version on the Switch itself, but I feel like that's why they're holding back, because they're going to do a whole marketing campaign for Tears of the Kingdom and for the new Nintendo Switch, and combine those things. That's my whole fan theory with that thing.
So they're going to Wii U this bad boy once again, Ali. You know what? I would be open to that, Scott, because I've long since said to you that the thing that would get me to buy whatever Nintendo's next console is, or whatever their next update for the Switch is, it would be Tears of the Kingdom. It would be Breath of the Wild 2. Like, that is the game that will... That's a system seller in itself. And I think they know that. Everyone else knows that. There's a lot of hype surrounding it. To me... If that game's coming out in May, do they have enough time to announce and then release a brand new system? I don't know. It's like 6 months or something, or maybe even longer from the time we're doing this, but it's a tight turnaround, perhaps.
I feel like all Nintendo need to do is shadow drop a trailer, and they dominate the gaming sphere whenever they do that. I remember when Labo dropped and everyone stopped to go, what the hell are you guys doing? Cardboard VR? And then they dominate. Whenever they put anything out, everyone talks about it for a bit. A new Nintendo Switch is what everyone thought was coming last year, and then it was just the OLED, which I've long said was the only component they could get together with all the other shortages that they had across the pandemic. So for me, it only makes more sense that they've had this thing ready in the wings for like 2 years now.
I agree in a sense. Obviously, Nintendo has a presence, and when they drop, just random morsels of information that can get games a whole lot of hype. However, they kind of shadow dropped the Wii U without really explaining what it was or marketing it very well.
They've
and that didn't sell. I hope they have. But if I worry that if they're keeping the Switch name, for instance, they kept the Wii name, you know what I mean? I don't want to conflate the two things, but I do think they cannot just expect people to buy a new machine because it's a new Nintendo machine. If that makes sense.
I mean, true. I guess it depends how many of you bought the OLED Switch. I just got one because I'm ill. But at the same time, I think that they've very much learned from that. They have to have learned from that. The Switch itself is almost, indicative of just how many lessons they learned from the Wii U period. The fact of just how well it's selling. Splatoon 3 already outselling Animal Crossing and Pokemon Arcades combined. So it feels like they have a really good presence, let's say, especially in Japan. But speaking of other stuff, speaking of Japan, there was a massive presence for the Yakuza series, kind of rebranding itself as the Like a Dragon series. It's its original name over in Japan. Also the name of the studio itself, Ryo Gagatoku, which got shown off at the State of Play, showing off a game called Ishin Like a Dragon, which is the unreleased feudal Japan setting in the Yakuza series.
That's it.
From ages ago.
Yes.
A game that people like me who've been with Yakuza since like 2006 have always wanted to play, but that game was always only available in Japan. Now it's finally coming over to the West, and Ryo Gagatoku said that reason is because of Ghost of Tsushima.
Yes.
That because Tsushima blew up so much worldwide, it encouraged them to reinvest in more Japan-centric stuff and bring it across to the West. I was a giddy man. I could not type to you fast enough.
Listen, I have no connection, or at least I don't have the same connection to this franchise and to the studio that you have.
Yes.
But I was watching that trailer, and then I subsequently watched the 10 minutes of gameplay footage that they released, and that thing looks gorgeous. I'm really excited to jump in on this, even if it scares me a little bit, because I was reading, kind of like interviews with the developers in the press releases that they put out afterwards, and they were essentially saying like, look, this is a dense game about like Japanese culture and its history, and if you don't already know that, we're not going to be holding your hand. We're going to assume you know what this franchise is, who these characters are, and what this time period is all about. And I'm like, I quite like the confidence of that, just to go, this is what we're about, like it all.
I would have to imagine, because the whole point of that game is that you take the characters from the modern setting, your Kiryu, your Majima, whoever, and you put them in a feudal Japanese setting. And I imagine, I've not played it, I've always read about this game, and that you're taking the tenets of what make those characters and applying them to what they might have done in a feudal Japanese setting. Kiryu, the big reveal of the main character, which made me freak out so much, he has a different name in this series, or it seems like he has a different name in this story, but we'll have to wait and see. I mentioned Yakuza stuff / Like a Dragon stuff though, because in Sega's TGS, Tokyo Game Show presentation, they only doubled down on it. They said, we've actually got 2 additional Yakuza games to come, Yakuza 8, or Like a Dragon 8. I think going forward it'll just be Like a Dragon. It's like Resident Evil Biohazard, was the original name. They revealed that Kiryu is yet again still alive. Dude has died twice over in Yakuza 5 and then disappeared in Yakuza 6, then popped back up in Yakuza 7, and now he's back in Yakuza 8 as a main character again. Point being though that Sega are all in with Like a Dragon, and they also confirmed a spin-off game called Like a Dragon Gaiden, which is all about how Kiryu is still alive and what he's been doing in between Yakuza 6, 7, and 8.
Explain that to me, because that's the one I don't actually know about. And you don't need to go into the big plot, but how is that going to play? Is it literally going to be the same gameplay engine as the last Yakuza game, or the last one he was starring in?
Well, so they've not really said. They've all they released to announce that game was a reveal of Kiryu sort of sitting outside a temple, and he's gets tapped on the shoulder by an old man. I imagine it's some sort of maybe almost like a religious thing. But Kiryu then says, "Oh, if you tap my left shoulder, I know there's a job." And as he turns around, one of his old contacts comes around to tell him that he has to, get dragged back into a life of crime. It's what the dude does. So there's that. But the fact that they're doing another Kiryu-focused game is what a lot of people wanted after Ichiban Kasuga was the protagonist in Yakuza 7. So they're doing everything that people want.
Yeah.
And if you've been with this series for the last 15 years, 16 years even, like me, it's just ridiculously cool.
I'll tell you this, the last 2 weeks with all of these showcases have had a lot of fan-pleasing announcements and moments in them. There's a reason that we are kind of giddy doing this news. And it's so good to do a giddy news, by the way. It feels like so long since we've been super positive about
Gideon.
Where the industry is. Very good, very
Yes.
good. I wish Vanquish was coming back.
I know.
Vanquish too. And it just feels like across all of these franchises, they just seem to be getting it right, and that's cool. Even stuff like that we probably weren't going to talk about that I'm going to force in here. The Resident Evil stuff, even like their announcements, and they're kind of showing off Resident Evil 4, or about to show off Resident Evil 4, the third-person mode for Resident Evil 8, and that's DLC. It's like, man, like all these cool franchises are just kind of like lined up to please, or at least attempt to please the fans in a way that they might not have been a decade ago.
Well, that's the thing. That's kind of what I wanted to harness in this video, is that collective energy that I feel a lot of us had watching these presentations, especially the State of Play one, or watching the TGS stuff. And it's just that feeling of, okay, you guys know what we want and you can deliver it. You're not messing stuff up like the GTA Definitive Edition, or insert messed up game here that we've all been through. There's a lot of promise right now. There's a lot of footage. There's actual gameplay footage of stuff. Tekken 8, Katsuhiro Harada getting out after that initial teaser was shown and just saying, hey, by the way, guys, that was all in-engine. You will get to play that, when the game comes out. And then talking about all the different rendering stuff that they've done for the storms in the background, all these different effects that they've got for the fights themselves. I think that stuff is what we all need to hear.
Yeah.
I remember reading across the pandemic, people are saying like, wait until we get through all this. The euphoric feeling that comes out of it as we all collectively move forward again will be incredible. And I feel like things like this are a step in that direction.
I hope so, Scott Telford. I really do, because this year has been quite a good year for video games, but so many of the games have been pushed to next year. Yes, we still got Elden Ring, which I'm definitely not complaining about. Yes, we're still getting God of War Ragnarok, which I'm definitely not complaining about. But essentially, from February 2023 onwards, it feels like we're going to get a whole bunch of cool releases. I'm doing this a lot. I've not been on camera in a lot, so I'm not really sure what to do with my hands. So I'm doing this.
That's 2023 in a nutshell. But I feel like the beginning of this year was absolutely rammed. Like, you had Horizon, Elden Ring, Ollie Ollie World, Kirby, whatever. Sifu.
Yes.
Loving a bit of Sifu. What is that? About forgetting?
No, that's what I was going to jump in and say, but then you got to it.
And things like that. And I feel like the summer was very much down to break, and we were sort of just waiting for the rest of this year to be filled in and next gen-ness to come to the fore. And I still want to know exactly what Xbox are doing. I feel like their TGS presentation was a bit not lackluster because it was very serviceable, but I want to know what their first-party teams are doing. I want to know what Xbox's grand plan is, as opposed to every time they're mentioned just being another Activision dispute in the headlines that their deal can't go through or whatever. So I'm waiting on bated breath for the future of Xbox stuff, but I feel like where Sony and Nintendo are, it's very good.
Yes,
it's very good times. So yeah, let us know what you think down in the comments below. What game are you most excited about from what you saw across the last few days? And I forget what I say after that. Apart from I'm Scott from WhatCulture.com.
We didn't talk about PSVR 2.
We're never going to talk about
this video. Let me do it.